Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're just getting started for today. Session 1 of 2 sessions of our collective learning series for building political momentum at CSW and beyond. And we're excited to have you. And as I had mentioned at the top of the meeting, today is day 1 in a series of 2 collective learning sessions. So today is the CSW Beginners Orientation. And of course, you've signed up and you're here. Thank you again for joining. And this session is with the aim to explore CSW as a political space and mechanism for the advancement of women's rights. For those who have maybe never participated in CSW or even participated once or twice and are seeking to learn and understand more. So that will be the main focus of our session today. But then we have another session tomorrow at the same time. If you have registered for this session, you will have seen the registration for tomorrow's session right below. But we're also going to share that registration at the end of today's meeting if you would like to join us. Tomorrow's session is delving a bit more deeply into nuancing our political commitment as MenEngage Alliance within CSW 67 this year. So we're seeking to begin collective agenda setting and strategizing on how to participate as us as an alliance, of those working to transform patriarchal masculinities and engagement in boys within this critical space for mobilization of feminist movements and the advancement of the normative framework on women's human rights. So exploring accountable advocacy as well, and really having a deep discussion on anti-feminist and patriarchal backlash that we're witnessing all around the world, including at the UN. So we really encourage you to join. It will be a great session. Thanks, Tom. Next slide. Oh, pardon. And one thing here is, of course, this session is in collaboration with MenEngage Africa Network and NAMEN North American MenEngage Network. So thank you to colleagues for co-organizing this session. And of course, what brings us here is the 67th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, which we will learn a bit of the history from today and what brings us to this present moment within the longer chronology, and achievements of this space. And this year's session is on innovation and technological change and education in the digital age. And it's being hosted as part of the Learning Collaborative, CoLab, which is a new initiative of MenEngage Alliance to precisely bring together spaces such as this one, where we can learn together, learn from each other, and raise our capacities on a broad range of critical topics, to gender justice. Wonderful. And so as we're getting started, it's my pleasure to introduce Mpiwa Mangwiro, who is the Policy and Advocacy Manager, and Rumbie, Chidoori, Regional Policy and Advocacy Coordinator with the MenEngage Africa Secretariat and Sonke Gender Justice. And over to you, colleagues.
Thank you, Jenny, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us today as we start day 1. I would just like to apologize in advance that I may have connectivity challenges, but my colleague Rumbie is also there to step in should that be the challenge on my end. Rumbie, you may also just introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Rumbie Elizabeth Chidoori, and I'm based in Johannesburg. I'm really excited and I'm hoping that this is going to be really an exciting session with great engagement. I'm looking forward to the engagement, and I'm looking forward to learning and sharing all the things that we are going to hear in this session. So please go ahead, Mpiwa, and I'll come up to you.
Thank you. So as Jenny has highlighted, we are going to start with we want to start by looking at the basics in terms of what is CSW, what we have been talking about, the Commission on the Status of Women, and what is its significance to our work. So to start off, CSW, it is a functionally mandated commission of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, the ECOSOC. So it is coming from there, and CSW is the most significant gathering that focuses on gender equality and women's issues internationally. It is also a space where governments discuss and strategize on gender equality, where the commission also gets to evaluate progress on gender equality, identify challenges, set global standards, and also formulate concrete policies to promote gender equality. So it is nearly 4,000 NGOs and representatives that gather every year at CSW. And this it's really the largest annual gathering of international feminist movements of the UN. And this provides a platform or an opportunity for renewal of collective purpose. And what is really the value of CSW is that it is instrumental in promoting women's rights. It is also instrumental in documenting the reality of women's lives. And it is also instrumental in shaping global standards on gender justice. So this is just in a nutshell to say, what is CSW? What is the purpose of CSW? What is the role, or what function does CSW serve? And then so CSW happens every year. So every year around about March, the commission takes place in New York. But then before the commission, before CSW the meeting that happens every year, there are processes that happen prior to that. So what happens pre-CSW? So there are a number of processes that happen pre-CSW, one of them being an expert group meeting. So an expert group meeting is hosted by the UN, and it is used in preparation of the program work of CSW. So the expert group meeting, normally it is used in preparation of the annual priority theme. So what happens is that every year there is a theme that is set. CSW, a theme is set. There is an annual theme, and there is a priority theme that is set, which is what guides the engagement that is going to happen. And then there is also the sub-theme that comes after the priority theme. So the gathering often is guided by the theme of the year to look at what is happening, and to also then come and engage and discuss and give reports around that. So that's what the expert group meeting does. It helps to shape that process, and it helps to shape the priority theme, but it may also be used for other purposes, like if there's a major report that needs to be discussed. In this process, submissions of expert papers are done towards the theme, and then an engagement or a discussion happens. So there's also the report of the Secretary General. So the report of the Secretary General, it gives comprehensive analysis of the current circumstances around women's rights, around gender equality, and then these are also used to inform what is called the zero drafts. And then also another process that happens is that there is the regional preparatory meetings. So the different regions that are there across the globe are then going to hold preparatory meetings around in the annual, around the priority theme and also the sub-theme. So this is what then is preparation around what different regions would want to input or would want to see go into the draft that is in, and what are the key issues that each region wants negotiated around or wants to contribute to the CSW. So that is what the regional preparatory meetings do. And then also there is a lot of feminist mobilization that happens. This happens through position papers, through advocacy agendas, through preparatory agenda setting and statements and sign-ons. So this is really a number of processes that happened during this period, culminating in the period that then we have the CSW taking place itself. As I've already mentioned, the CSW is happening this year, and we have our two themes, the priority theme and the review theme. And so what is the relevance of NGOs really in this space? So it is the principal global policymaking body, which is dedicated exclusively to gender equality and advancement of women. And for NGOs and CBOs, it is one of the only areas where there is opportunity to interact with and to try and influence global policy making. So the CSW is one of the only missions of the UN that does not limit participation to states only. So organizations that have got observer status are able to then be part of this process and also be part of engage and lobby states and decision makers during this during the CSW. So globally, there is what is called agreed conclusions from CSW, and this is what is used by governments to inform their own policies and practices and guidelines around the different issues that are addressed. And also the agreed the agreed conclusions will then be focusing on what the priority theme is and the review theme is, and then this is what states agree on. Every year, it's the document that they'll go and take and then use to guide them to implement and to do work and to address issues around that area. So this is a platform. Participating at the CSW, it allows NGOs an opportunity to also then engage with states, to also then participate in and monitor the negotiations that happen during that process. So also, as I have mentioned, that there's always the priority theme and the review theme. So this is the platform where an opportunity is given to really review the theme in depth, to address it from an in-depth perspective, and for intergovernment deliberations to take place, and also for then what I've alluded to, the agreed conclusions to be negotiated and come out of that platform. And so CSOs and NGOs are also able to make oral and written statements for this process, and they are also able to participate as part of government official delegations. So you can be able to be part of your own country government official delegations. And if you are part of that delegation, that means that you are also going to be able to participate in the negotiations that take place around the agreed conclusions. And also what CSOs can also do in this place is that they can also be part of official side events. States do host side events where they present, be it reports or be it dialogues, or showcase different initiatives that they are doing to address issues around gender equality, around women's rights, and also to address issues that will be specifically zooming into the priority and the review theme. So CSOs, by being at CSW, you are also able to be part of these side events, and in some instances you can even collaborate with governments to host these side events. But CSOs are also able to host their own parallel side events, which can also showcase or address what they are also doing in their own spaces, or which can also engage with what states are alluding to or are presenting or are stating. So it's a platform to be both participate in official side events, but also to host parallel events. And it also gives opportunity for networking and movement building. So this is also where we can galvanize as feminist organizations, meet, network, strengthen our movement, address some of the challenges that we are seeing that in the backlash that we experience towards gender equality and women's rights. So having said that, what is our priority theme for this year? Our priority theme for this year is innovation and technological change and education in the digital age for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. I think one of the key issues that we've been talking about globally is the issue of achieving gender equality within and the empowerment of women and girls within the digital divide space. So that is what the priority theme is looking at. And then if we look at the review theme, it's looking at challenges and opportunities in achieving gender equality and the empowerment of rural women and girls. So this is coming agreed conclusions of the session, and from time to time, and what was agreed on, and it will then can take some of what was agreed on previously to inform what becomes a review theme, to then look at what is the progress that has been made, where are we at, and also considering that issues around rural women, exclusion and marginalized of rural women and girls is a key issue, and so it becomes one of the themes that will be reviewed now. So having spoken about all this that happens during the CSW itself, now what happens post CSW? So what happens is, as we have addressed, we've said that there is sorry about that. As we have mentioned, we have agreed conclusions. So agreed conclusions can become an instrument that can be used for national advocacy. So we can come back post CSW and say, this is what states have agreed on. This is what you have committed to. And then we now want to use that as a tool for us to advocate nationally to ensure that that is what our states implement and that is what they do. And also, it can also be used as a tool to hold states accountable to say, you committed to this, and this is the agreed conclusion that you were a part of, that you committed to, and we're now holding you accountable to ensure that you live up to this commitment, or we are holding you accountable to address the challenges and the gaps that are there for these commitments to be realized. And it can also as well be used to prepare and inform the next session, because as we have mentioned, CSW happens every year. So what's critical is not just to come to the space and engage and walk away, but what's important is then to ensure that post that we use the agreed conclusions and all the other documents and commitments and processes of the CSW to shape our advocacy going forward and to also prepare for the following years. And it's important that when we go to CSW, we align our advocacy work, we align our events to the theme of CSW, to the priority and review themes. So it's always important to know what is the priority theme for the year, what is the review theme for this year, and to also start preparing, because we do our preparations prior, we do some of our written submissions prior, and then we also prepare for our oral statements that are then read during CSW. But this is all preparatory work that has to be done prior to going to CSW itself, so that we then use CSW as a platform to then engage and influence and lobby. So that is what would be critical for us to look at. And it's also important to also from time to time go to the CSW, go online, go to the CSW page, go and look at what is happening, go and look at what are some of the opportunities that are there to continue with our advocacy processes during this time. I think I will now talk about briefly that, as we have mentioned, that there are organizations that are part of or engage with this process. We also have what is called the Women's Rights Caucus, which is over 400 feminist, women's rights, and LGBTQIA+ organizations from around the world who carry out joint policy advocacy towards CSW. And some of the major shifts that we have seen and major outcomes that have come out of CSW have been as a result of the Women's Rights Caucus and the lobbying and advocacy initiatives that they make use of. So I'm just going to take a pause now in terms of what we have to share about the basics around CSW, and then I'll also ask Rumbie to just get ready to take us on. But maybe in the chat you can also just think through how we can use the outcomes of CSW to hold our governments accountable for commitments that they've made. So that's something that we can also pause and be thinking through as we continue. Thank you. Rumbie, you can please get ready to also take on.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mpiwa. So perhaps in the chat section, colleagues may also, if you have had an opportunity to engage with the CSW prior to today, please do share how you have engaged, how you found that process, and what stood out most for you. So any one of those. I'm just going to check in with Jenny. Jenny, can I go right into my session, which will look specifically at language advocacy, looking at the agreed conclusions?
Thank you so much. Do you want to finish up maybe introducing the key stakeholders at CSW?
Okay. The participants or attendees who will be at CSWs, most importantly, are the state actors, who are the policy makers who we will be trying to engage with in those spaces. So these are perhaps your national government representatives who are going to represent your country at CSW. Perhaps they could be coming from the various ministries relating to foreign policy. These are the state representatives that you want to local municipalities, or there could be more local. So it is always good to engage with your national representatives so that you are aware of who is actually going to the CSW, so you can engage prior and during and post CSWs and partners, and whom you can engage with in terms of advocacy work, and also in terms of even hosting side events and writing joint statements with. You can also check with your local organizations, other NGOs who have those that intend to participate at CS. And as Mpiwa has mentioned, some of them are the Women's Rights Caucus, which is a very great space and platform for advocacy. And you can also check with other partners as well, in terms of private partners who will be engaging with the CSW. So those are just examples of some of the key stakeholders that you would want to engage with and want to perhaps even lobby or look out for in terms of partnering for advocacy interventions. In terms of how we can use the outcomes of CSW to hold our governments to account for commitments made, I'm going to ask that from what you have heard today in this session and from what you know, please do share in the chat section how you think we can make use of the outcomes. I think Mpiwa also alluded to the fact that in terms of the agreed conclusions, they really set the policy and political groundwork for the realization of rights within our countries. So how can we make use of these agreed conclusions? How do we hold our states accountable? Please do share in the chat sections, or if you also think of creative ways in which we can hold our governments accountable, please do mention in the chat section. Would like to hear from you, and would like to also share any best practices from colleagues that have engaged with CSW before. I think I'm just going to, can I go into the language advocacy, Jenny?
Thank you so much. I'm going to present a few slides and then over to you. Is that okay?
Okay. Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Tom. And if you can go ahead, just deepening a little bit on the CSW negotiations of the agreed conclusions. And it might feel a bit overwhelming, no? A lot of information, but we'll just continue forth. And then just to let you know, there's a big portion of time at the end where we'll open it up for you to ask any specific questions that you may have, but just to ensure you know, it can feel like a lot when you're hearing all of this for the first time. So just patience with yourself and ourselves, no, as we're moving through this, as Mpiwa already shared, but just visualizing here, CSW is housed within the Economic and Social Council. And so within the bigger architecture of the UN, it's one of the main 6 organs of the United Nations. Next slide, Tom. And ECOSOC, importantly, that many of you will know, is responsible for many things, no? Of course, the Commission of the Status of Women is one of them, but as well on the high-level political forum, which is the review mechanism for Agenda 2030, amongst many other different mechanisms like the regional ECOSOC mechanisms and various support functions, no, to the General Assembly and the Security Council. Next slide. And just a brief history, because I think sometimes when we engage in CSW, we have so many opportunities to build partnerships with other feminists, LGBTIQ, youth, indigenous, climate justice movements, and yet the negotiations can feel a bit intimidating, and that's what we're seeking to demystify here today. And maybe in order to just make note, of why they're so important, just a 2-minute history, of the Commission of the Status of Women. Starting in 1946, it was established, and over the 1950s, it continued to grow as in recognition as a space, a critical space for the international women's movement to engage in. The first Global Women's Conference, which was born out of the Commission of the Status of Women, was in 1975. And in 1979, this is after 4 years of preparatory work by the Commission, of ongoing resolution after resolution, which the agreed conclusions that we're speaking of is just the name that the official outcome resolution of the Commission of the Status of Women has within that space. It's called the agreed conclusions, but it's the resolution that comes out from the international negotiations. It took 4 years of this fight to continue to advance women's rights and to achieve the adoption of this global convention on the Convention of Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and Girls, achieved in 1979. And again, after so much effort of feminist movements reaching Beijing and the Beijing Platform for Action, another historical moment. But this is after year of dedicated work of holding the line and progressing the line of women's rights precisely at this space, precisely in the negotiations of the agreed conclusions. Next slide. just a quick moment, no? This was the adoption of the CEDAW convention, no? Just a moment of celebration. It was such a wonderful achievement in the advancement, especially of a treaty, no? Which is binding. Governments that ratify the convention must hold to its jurisprudence, no? So it was a wonderful moment. And the next slide, please. Just a moment, no, of Beijing, or the recognition that human rights are women's rights are human rights, these moments of great achievement. So just to contextualize a little bit, why we focus so much on the negotiations and why it's important just to learn so that we can navigate and contribute our agendas and expertise to that process. Next slide, please. My colleagues have already explained, but this is just to visualize en road to the agreed conclusions. We have the expert report. Experts provide inputs of their expertise upon this year's theme. The UN Secretary General produces his report off of the UN Secretary General's report, which is informed by the expert working group. We get the first draft, that's why it's called a zero draft. It's the first document that we receive on the agreed conclusions. It's the first draft upon which we begin the advocacy process. Next slide, please. And just really quickly, when you receive that document or you read it, to make it simple, it has two parts. Preambular paragraphs are the paragraphs at the beginning, which are recapping. We recognize, we reiterate the importance of the CEDAW Convention. We reiterate the importance of the Beijing Platform for Action. We are reiterating the analysis that we have on this year's theme. So we're really centering the problem analysis and some of the understandings that we have about the problems that we see related to women's rights and gender justice relating to this year's theme. The operative paragraphs come later on. These are action paragraphs. This is where we begin to make recommendations on what needs to change, what are we expecting to see, what actions do governments and other stakeholders need to take. So they're quite easy to differentiate because they go from analysis, and nuancing of the problem to action and recommendations. Thanks so much. And next slide. When we're doing language advocacy on the agreed conclusions, and we have an exciting activity coming up that Rumbie and Mpiwa will lead us through, where you're going to get the opportunity to input on the negotiation document, the agreed conclusions, so you can learn how to do so. There's just something to know in terms of how to input into the document content-wise. How do you add your agenda? And really easy to sort of visualize is you receive the document and you read something that is in line politically, you find it to be strong language, then you highlight it in green. If it's missing something, this is missing a recognition of LGBTIQ rights, it's missing SRHR and the need for comprehensive sexuality education, you write it in and you add it and you highlight it in yellow. If you read something that is problematic, the language or framing is regressive, you block it out in red, which means this is not good language. This needs to be removed. And then we share these inputs, you send these inputs to your government. So the government is beginning to receive expert opinions from civil society on how to make sure the language is in line with the most progressive, most political outcome. And two things I would like to add to that is you have to build your recommendations based upon prior agreed upon language. That means you can't really go into the zero draft and add anything that you want to, because the negotiations build upon themselves. So you have to quote, in a sense, a prior resolution that had good language that you like, that you want to add here. Although there is some room, to be progressive and to add new language, but it's something that you have to work off of a prior agreed upon language. In a sense, you need to quote the source of where you're building this language from. And we'll share a tool with you. Obviously, it's impossible for any person to remember every resolution that has been adopted in the UN. So there's a really helpful tool that just makes this very easy and simple for you to go in and search and then use that language to build off of for your own expert recommendations. No? Thank you so much. Next slide. And here's the tool. If one of my colleagues can share it in the chat box, that would be great. So here you can search under any theme. You can search engaging men and boys and see also a recap of all resolutions that include that lens. So it's really a practical tool just to navigate. Also, if you're doing national advocacy and you want to understand what is the normative framework, as we call it within the international space, the agreed upon language that in multilateral negotiations has been adopted, you can search anything you would like in this tool. It's very easy, so highly recommend you checking it out. No? Thanks so much. Next slide. And this is like the easy timeline for the negotiation process, so we can demystify it. No? We'll go through it in 4 steps and then 5 in a sense, the outcome, what happens. So step 1 is that 0 draft, that first draft of the document is released. Then we go to the second. Basically, after the draft is received, governments take a look at it. Civil society shares their inputs with governments, and all governments submit their official recommendations upon the 0 draft, and we get a compilation text. The compilation text, is, you can imagine, is, well, it ends up being over 100 pages long. It's every government in the negotiations having added their recommendations for the language that they want to see, oftentimes from the expert advice of civil society. So it's an entire compilation document of the starting point of where everyone's positions are and language recommendations are. Then we move into revisions 1, 2, and 3, which are linked to negotiations 1, 2, and 3. So these informal processes are where member states, governments go into a room and begin reading through the agreed conclusions, paragraph by paragraph, and beginning the negotiation. No, this can be quite tense. This is definitely a highly political process. And the longer you go on in these various steps of the first reading, the second reading, and the third reading, and the documents that come out of each of those processes, the more difficult it is to shift the language. If you want to shift something big or add something big, at the beginning is easier. As you move on, it becomes harder and harder because you're getting more and more consensus or agreement. We're trying to move towards adoption. Then there's a final reading. This is the final text after all the negotiations. And there's really 3 outcomes that can happen. If everyone agrees with the final draft, we have an adopted agreed conclusions. If there's still some questions, considerations, challenges to the text, the CSW Bureau or the facilitator of the negotiation will develop a final text. And if it's agreed upon, then we have adoption of the agreed conclusions. If there's highly contentious portions of the discussion and there's no agreement, it might go to a vote. But even if it goes to a vote, right, and there's movement forward towards agreement on some of those, the negotiation in a sense fails. It's not considered an official adopted agreed conclusions, which can be really problematic because it's an indication that we don't have global consensus on a women's rights document, normative framework. Thank you so much. Next. And I'll be quick through these as we're running a bit behind time. And the negotiations do fail sometimes. 2003 CSW 47 on women's rights and elimination of all forms of violence against women and girls. This year, the negotiation failed for many reasons, like use of religion to justify violence against women, ending impunity for violence against women in armed and post-conflict situations, just a few of the reasons why the contentious sticky points of the negotiation. Next slide, please. And also for themes of the rights of empowerment of rural women in 2012. And that, just to note, this is the review theme coming up this year, no? So just important for us to track not just the priority theme, but the review theme. And again, this negotiation failed, and some of the sticky points in the negotiation were like attacks by conservative governments on women's rights and SRHR, traditional patriarchal values and practices versus human rights. Always know we see a lot of pushback on SRHR and SOGS and LGBTIQ rights. So these are unfortunately uniform pushbacks, backlash that we see from year to year. Next slide, please. And I'll just be very brief with this, but we see trends over time, no? There are positive developments of how the normative framework is advancing, like the need to support women human rights defenders, fund them, protect them, no? Make sure that their voice is heard, and condemning for all forms of violence against women and girls, and refraining from invoking any custom or tradition or religious consideration as an excuse for that. So we're seeing, some advancement, but also we're seeing negative trends, no? Definitely continued opposition to SRHR and SOGS rights, as I was mentioning, and comprehensive sexuality education. And yeah, I'll leave it at that since we're running out of time, but we'll share this slide so you can take a look more in depth. And then just finally, I wanted to share the last one, which we're engaging in this session as MenEngage Alliance members, no? And we know that it's really important to extend our accountability framework to our advocacy work, which we've come to term as accountable advocacy. And what this means is that, especially within the political sphere, where the most difficult asks of the feminist agenda are being negotiated in the space where there is the most constriction of power, it's really important that we are able to stand in solidarity and behind the leadership of feminist, LGBTIQ, youth, indigenous, climate justice activists, and to advance women's rights hand in hand. And what is accountable advocacy look like in practice, shall we say? And it really is challenging discourses that overtly center a masculinities agenda or solely focus on men as victims of patriarchy. Also, that engaging men and boys is overly centered, no, within the agreed conclusions. We don't negotiate or seek to have it included multiple times. We would rather have the most difficult, no, feminist agenda items included in the agreed conclusions to advance women's rights, and some deep and nuanced and political language on men and boys, rather than going in trying to just push as much language on masculinities as possible, no? And we seek to add value to the broader feminist agendas via a men and masculinities lens. So we seek to contribute to be one component that's meaningfully adding value to the broader feminist mobilization within that advocacy space. And we work in alignment and amplify feminist advocacy agendas, especially the most challenging political asks and demands. We're not just advocating for transforming patriarchal masculinities. We're also trying to weave an analysis on how patriarchal masculinities limit access to SRHR and comprehensive sexuality education, and advocate for that alongside our feminist colleagues. And we seek to build advocacy partnerships with feminists, women's rights, SOGS, anti-racist, climate, youth, and social justice activists. We seek to be a part of the broader feminist mobilization. Thanks so much. Back over to my colleagues, Rumbie and Mpiwa, and now for an activity so that we can learn how to input into the agreed conclusions document.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jenny. I'm going to ask my colleagues if they can share the link for the activity on the chat section, so that we can be able to direct colleagues. But also just to add on to, in terms of what Jenny has said, I think a lot has been talked about, the agreed conclusions and language. And we often would, perhaps the question to ask is, but why? Because language is power. I think that is the most important thing. Language is power. And because the agreed conclusions themselves, they set the standards and the commitments that member states themselves agree to implement. So this is when we, as civil society organizations, derive the power to call the governments to account based on those obligations. And as Jenny has indicated, it's really the agreed conclusions really represent, the compromises and the accommodations of that very difficult negotiating environment. It's not easy. And also to mention that it's these 2 weeks in March really also kind of represent the pointy end of the negotiations. So we're nearing the end, we're nearing adoption. And prior to the CSW, these 2 weeks, it would have been a month of agenda setting, diplomacy, and a lot of civil society advocacy. Just checking in to see if the link has been shared in the chat. I'm struggling with my laptop here to see. Please, can you assist me, colleagues? So we can see on the document, colleagues, please click on the document that has just been shared in the text. And as Jenny indicated when she was speaking, that you highlight the language that you want to delete in red. So you do not delete anything in the document, but you just highlight the language that you want to delete, and you highlight in green the language that you want to see retained in the text. And then when you are suggesting a new language, you bold it, and then you underline and you highlight it in yellow. So if creating new paragraphs, you use the following format for as long as the new paragraph all follow the same original paragraph. So it's important that you follow those instructions. This helps because it usually is a Google document in which a lot of people are making their inputs. So it's important that people see which, in terms of the language that has been added, in terms of the language that needs to come out. It's important that people are able to see, and it's important that you follow the formatting rules in that respect. I'm going to sort of try also and share my screen to sort of give you an example so that you can see an example of the text. Okay, so to just give an example of what it looks like. So here you see Singapore has added something to the text, and they've indicated that what they're adding, the phrase that they're adding is where appropriate. And then next, the Russian Federation has also added text, and their text is take concrete steps to. And then the US has suggested a delete, and they have indicated that they want to delete systematically, the word systematically. And they've also indicated that they want to add explore feasible ways to. And the Russian Federation has also indicated that they want to delete and incorporate the phrase. And so the interventions are very technical, and you actually have to be able to understand and go through some of the previous resolutions. Of course, whilst it is not easy to read all of them, which there are quite a lot, but it's important. That's why we have, which also shows you some of the agreed languages, and that agreed language that has been agreed prior that we can use in terms of when making interventions into these paragraphs. There's also references to certain particular resolution where it starts with the letter E, which is in parentheses, which starts with the letter E, /CN. So that's a reference to a prior resolution. And then back to I'm going to stop sharing and then back to our text, which is in the Google document. Perhaps I can ask colleagues, those that want to put something into the text that is at the bottom of the text box. Can we please indicate what we want to write? Can we please make changes to the text and then show the additions in terms of highlighting in red if you want to delete, highlighting in green if you want to see the text retained, and if you are highlight. So please go ahead, colleague. We are seeing another addition in the respect of the word entire, women and girls in all their diversity. And please feel free when making changes to the text as well to put in the reasons why you think those changes should be made. So it could be in the form of a comment. You are able to put a comment and indicate why you would like to see that change. In terms of language, it's important that we indicate a strong and progressive language. So we want language that is inclusive, and we want language that is rights-based, and we also want to see strong references to human rights instruments and treaties that provide the basis for the rights that we want to hold our states accountable to. And then also we should avoid use of words that are viewed as weak or neutral, and these could be words like perhaps take note of, or take steps to, or take measures. These are the kind of phrases that mainly states like to use because they're neutral, and it's often easy to not be held accountable to take measures to, because there is it's very easy to get out of it and say we have taken even the smallest amount of measure. So it's important that we want language that is not neutral, but language that is very progressive. We want to see strong language. Governments must. So those are that's the type of language that we want to see. We also don't want to see language that reinforces harmful gender stereotypes, for instance, or frames maybe women in terms of mothers only, or perhaps things like references to unpaid care work as women's work. So we should all be watchful and watch out for such kind of language within the text of the resolutions or the agreed conclusions, and ensure that we just have language that is strong, that is inclusive, and that is rights-based. Thank you, colleagues. I'm seeing some really great additions into the text there. I hope you found this exercise to be useful and a good learning exercise. I think I'm going to end here and hand over to Jenny.
Thank you so much, Rumbie. That was really helpful and insightful. And yeah, I think in some ways just beginning the process of demystifying how to add our inputs and some of the guidelines around how to do so. So thank you very much. That was really helpful. I hope, colleagues, you felt so as well. Let us know in the chat box. And we'll move ahead as we're moving towards our Q&A, because we're really excited to hear any questions you may have. I've been seeing some coming up already in the chat box. So keep writing any questions, comments, or reflections so we can address them as we move towards the Q&A. And so having said that, Tom, if you don't mind sharing screen, we're going to do a brief introduction now to feminist youth and LGBTIQ demands at CSW. So again, if we're engaging under accountable advocacy, what are the broader feminist mobilizations taking place that we need to stand in solidarity with, as well as youth and LGBTIQ demands? So launching us with the youth mobilization, engagement, organizing, and agendas for CSW. Over to Nyasha. Nyasha, do you mind sharing with us on youth advocacy? Nyasha, are you available to jump in? Maybe there's a connectivity issue. If so.
Oh my God. Thanks, Jenny. Can't believe all this while I was busy ranting and I'm on mute. Hi, everyone. And I'm excited to be here and to just unpack a little bit around the youth participation and engagement at CSW. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I will not really speak a lot, but just to share that with the processes that have been ongoing, there are various processes around how to enhance participation of young people at CSW. And they are like regional, national processes, as well as some global processes that have been ongoing. And some of the global processes that have been ongoing include a space that has been created by the NGO CSW, the Youth Preparation Series, and this was a series of learning sessions for young people. We started around February, and I think the last one concluded sometime this week. And the whole idea with them was just to create space for young people to be able to learn more about how to navigate the CSW space, what is CSW and what does it mean for young people. And then there's been some engagements with the Young Feminist Caucus in terms of organizing for sessions during CSW, and obviously through UN Women as well. There's been a lot of convening and also a youth pre-CSW forum, which was held sometime last week as well. So with the UN Women and the youth portfolio that they have, what they've been working was also to consolidate inputs for young people at a global level. So they issued a survey which they were asking young people to input on what they think on the priority theme. So now with the process that will be ongoing, there's also going to be the priority at the youth pre-CSW forum. This is when those high-level priorities were shared, and these were consolidated from young people. And I'm going to be sharing about these priorities, and then also share about how as the young people in the MenEngage Alliance are actually going to be engaging at CSW. So some of the priorities that have been listed, actually, I'll just share them in brief, and then at one of the slides for this presentation, it actually has the link where you can actually read what it means. And when we're making some contribution as young people from the Alliance, we're also adding language that has got to do about male involvement, changing masculinities, and also meaningful engagement of young people in their diversity. So some of the priorities now that we came up, which we're calling high-level priorities from young people across the globe, include gender equality and technology. That is looking at, this is not the first time that probably the theme is coming back. Yes, first time it's structured the way it is, but we know that whatever we're talking about gender equality and technology has also been included in other themes. So that's where we're saying we need that reaffirmation and of already existing commitments. For example, we know that the CSW 67 Global Youth and Adolescents Recommendation Document. Then we're pushing for co-leadership, co-creation, and co-ownership. So that is looking at engagement of young people during CSW, pre-CSW, during CSW, and post-CSW to actually be effective participation, and also young people to have that space for decision making, and which is something that we're already demonstrating here as an alliance, to create space for young people to come and share their priorities, to share their strategy, to share their agenda. Then we're also calling for the funding and resourcing and investing for a digital feminist future, to actually ensure that we are not only doing lip service, but when we talk about digital education, digitalization, we're also looking at it from a feminist perspective, and that requires funding and resourcing. Then we're also pushing and calling for digital commons and open source solutions for a feminist equitable world. So this has got to do with the issue around access to information, and how that digital information is accessed, who is keeping that information, where and how. Then we're also talking about technology-facilitated gender-based violence. So a lot of violence has been perpetrated against young people online. So we're also saying, as we talk about gender-based violence, let's also not forget to speak out and to also include issues around online gender-based violence. Then we're also pushing for the protecting, promoting, upholding human rights for a feminist future, because we believe for us to achieve a feminist future, of why we are here as an alliance to talk about men and masculinity, is also looking at that feminist future. So we need to also infuse the issues and the recognition of human rights. Then the issues around digital privacy. I think there's been a lot of conversation in the world around internet algorithms. Like I remember discussing even with my partner this other day when I was Googling something on AliExpress, and when I went to my Facebook, all that pop-up that started to come on my Facebook was all those things that I've been searching on AliExpress. So when you look at it and say, what does digital privacy mean? Because we talk about access to the digital technologies, the digital space, but is it coming with the required privacy that young people may need for them to thrive, may need to protect their human rights? Then we're also talking about law enforcement and justice. That is, are there cyber bills in the countries? Are there any laws that looks at how one is brought to charge when there's online gender-based violence, how one is brought to charge probably when there's the digital privacy has been violated? So looking at that's the other priority. Next slide, please. Then looking also at climate action, innovation, and technological change, we really recognizing how climate action is a key and important agenda for us. And we're saying, how are we going to use digital technologies and technological change to actually do with climate change, and to ensure that young people are participating in the processes, in the advocacies, and in the innovations. Then looking at women, youth, peace, and security agenda, we strongly believe that the use of the digitalization or use of digital technologies is very important if we're also going to bring the peace that we need in the world. Then education in the digital age, that is looking at how are we going to be promoting education for gender equality, but using the digital technologies. Then the future of work, decent work, and social protection. We'll continue talking about this, looking even at how our worlds have evolved since COVID-19, and we've started to work most oftenly digitally. What does that mean now when we talk about decent work for a young person in a digital economy, in a digital working environment, and what kind of social protections are available? Because it's one person to support a person who is probably need insurance to be traveling to work every day, and it's another story when we talk probably about insurance for someone who's working from home, and what does that mean? And then also, this also links to the priority on well-being, health, and sexual and reproductive health and rights, looking at overall well-being and Agenda 2030, particularly SDG 3, that is talking about health and how this can be done digitally, and we can be able to promote overall health and well-being for young people in access to sexual and reproductive health rights, information, and services. Then also looking at food and agricultural technology and innovation. We strongly believe that as young people, we also need to have a say or to participate when it comes to how we're going to be pushing for innovations, technological innovations in food security, focusing on agriculture and food production. Then decolonizing technology. I love this one because this is a priority for us, because we believe that as we continue to talk about global development, gender equality, male involvement, feminist movement building. We cannot do this without also looking at the issue of decolonizing. And then when we talk about decolonizing technology, we're looking at what is available for young people, in which spaces, and who is controlling or who is able to have a say of who gets what and who does not get what, and how are we going to be decolonizing to ensure that access to digital spaces for young people or access to digital technology is equalized across the globe. Then there's also links with the priority on data research and knowledge, informed and evidence. This is something we're really looking forward to say as young people, we really need to look at who is finding the data, who is researching, and where is the knowledge, how is it compiled, and what is the role that we are playing. Then there's also links to the disinformation, digital accountability, and transparency. With the internet or digital spaces comes a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and no one gets to be accountable. So this also links to the other one that I talked about, policies available in order to ensure that we safeguard around disinformation, misinformation, and there's also transparency in the way that communication is done. Then the last of the priorities is public-private partnerships, because we strongly believe that if you're going to be successful in implementing the resolutions that will come out of CSW 67, there's also need for that strong public and private partnership that can either center young people in the middle. So these are like the 18 high-level priorities that young people across the globe have come up with and are pushing towards. Then next slide. Then when we talk about youth engagement and participation in CSW for the young people in the Alliance, so we have the youth reference group, and this is a group of young people and also allies for young people who are like an sort of, well, I can simplify it, say like an advisory board, but they come from the different regions that we are represented as an alliance. And the purpose is for them to be thinking around how we can effectively ensure meaningful youth engagement and participation of young people across all the works of the Alliance and the spaces. So with the youth reference group members, we created a sub-working group of other youth reference group members who are interested in CSW, because as we work, we also understand that people have got different interests, different engagements that they would like to do. So with this sub-working group, what we had 2 ad hoc meetings where we are planning on exactly what is our approach and engagement at CSW, and we agreed, there was an agreement to have 1 members of the youth reference group participate physically at CSW, and then about 5 members are going to be participating virtually. And in our last call, we are also exploring the option of creating country hubs. So we will pilot this idea because it's fairly a new one, on figuring out how the youth reference group members in a country can bring together other young people that they work with, or especially other young people that they work with, or young people that can be recommended to them from members of the Alliance that work with young people, and create a hub where they can get to sit together, log in onto some sessions at CSW, especially the ones that are on a hybrid format that can allow some form of interaction, and then be able to then engage. And we've been exploring this option, so we are a bit half confident that probably what we're going to be able to do is have 1 or 2 hubs that will pilot and see how that works. Then part of the program is also, we have agreed that on the 9th during CSW, we're actually going to have a MenEngage Alliance Youth Caucus, and the purpose of the caucus will be and we're really planning to make this hybrid for those in New York and also for those that are not in New York, for it to be a hybrid event. And the purpose will be for young people to come and convene and reflect through on the processes at CSW, on our key ask as the MenEngage youth within the Alliance, and also strategize on how we can get to support each other and make our advocacy agenda ahead. So, and lastly, we are also in the process of joining the main digital campaign from MenEngage Alliance, and we are really inviting, if you have any quotes or messages or key asks which are in line with the priority theme that you'd like to be had, regardless of being in New York or not even engaging in CSW virtually, we're really inviting those messages. If you have them, you can send us through your picture if you would want, your quote or your message. Then we're going to be making some podcasts that will also help us do social media engagement to also amplify our voices within the Alliance. So I think this is what I had to share about the youth. Thank you. Back to Jenny, and you can guide on the next steps.
Thank you so much. And I was going to share, if you're a youth member, which is considered 35 years or younger, then even let us know in the chat, and we can keep you looped in to our ongoing mobilization for CSW 67. And Tom, if you don't mind sharing the slide, I'm going to be really brief here because we're running short on time. So we're going to delve much deeper tomorrow into the political asks of the feminist mobilization, feminist and LGBTIQ mobilization and demands at CSW 67 tomorrow. And since we're running short on time, I think I'll just share one slide. They very much echo the youth demands. And it's important to share that in the Women's Rights Caucus, the global youth demands are integrated within the Women's Rights Caucus agenda setting, as are the LGBTIQ caucus demands. So really, when we're saying the Women's Rights Caucus, it is a collective pooling of demands of various movements. So they very much mirror the youth demands above. So we'll discuss some more tomorrow, but I thought this was really an important slide to shape, and this comes from the Women's Rights Caucus teach-in, to shape how we need to reimagine the priority theme. We need to push back on government framing in a way to really expand, and nuance what we're seeking to advance this year. So of course, the priority theme is innovation and technological change in education in the digital age for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. The reframing is more in line with inclusion and meaningful participation of all women, girls, and gender diverse people in all their diversity, in digital space and in decision-making, in the power structure, influencing and being at the table in the power structure, right? At all levels of use, design, management, and governance of digital technologies to strengthen human rights and advance gender equality. And this is an important outcome that's coming out of the negotiations that we're hearing. Many governments are pushing back on a lot of the language, the feminist additions to the zero draft and the agreed conclusions on beginning to call on the role of accountability of governments and big business for AI and big tech and its black box nature, which we know has a very patriarchal governance structure. Very few global north tech companies making decisions for tech that is playing a role all over the world. And that these governments are pushing back on the analysis going to that systems level. And so this is a way for us to consider, yes, we're engaging in this year's theme, and yes, we can still stand alongside our feminist and LGBTIQ partners in pushing back to reimagine how we want to advance the theme, I'll pause there. Join us tomorrow for more on feminist analysis of the agendas, and pleasure to invite Stevan, Lynn, the Executive Director of NAMEN, who will lead us through our last section, where we delve into now the agenda on men and masculinities. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Congratulations to the presenters prior to this session. Your information was informative, directive, great. And Jen, now we see the battle before us that we already knew, but now is in clear form the importance of CSW in changing the world for women and girls. And I'm just so honored. All right, you guys, so here we go. We're almost done for today. I see that you've stayed on with us. You've participated. We love it. This is an action-oriented movement, as Jen is going to speak more about that. So let's talk a little bit about today. If you don't mind, they've asked engaging men and boys in this mission that we're on. We're going to talk to you a little bit about some more themes. We're going to go over a couple of things we've already talked about, reiterate it, as well as we have an exercise, one more for you, but it's critical that you participate in this, all right? Next slide, please. All right, first thing we need you to do is go to this site, menti.com, on your phones. If for those of you who have the ability to do so, we want you to download this. We are now going to fill out this form or go through this exercise, a survey, which we're going to really get a chance to see where your minds are at, where your thinking is, where's your expertise, where do you kind of see us moving forward, and discuss it a little bit and as we upload it to the site. All right, so I'm going to give you a few minutes. Here it is, menti.com. All right, and the code that you're going to inject. Got it? Thanks, Jen. Menti.com. Code 7227-1404. All right. So as we are moving forward, and I believe Jen is going to help me out as well as Tom. I believe all of us should be there. Hopefully you're there by now. Let's go on to the next screen and move forward in this process. All right. So as we're still doing that, I'm going to kind of go through our collective politics, if you will, on what MenEngage is looking forward to in the CSW, not only 67, but looking back and what we've already said, we wanted to have done and completed, as well as what could we look forward to in the future. One, addressing the proliferation of misogynistic online groups, spaces, and I'm going to move this if you don't mind, spaces and narratives, often referred to as the manosphere. All of us understand now the World Wide Web. There you go. Good job, Adriana. Good call. So all of us understand now, all too clear, the power of the World Wide Web, even now as we speak, as a collective agent, in many ways thought of as in its beginnings, a way that we can talk around the world. We can share each other's stories and tell the stories that oftentimes were not seen in mass media. We couldn't tell what was going on, particularly because of patriarchal regimes. We all understand that. But now we need to see, it seems to be untethered. And so we're going to look at what we can do and how we could use it to our benefit, as well as warning signs to be very careful that the World Wide Web is, as I said, untethered and unmanaged at this point, ungoverned. And we just definitely want to make sure that it's still seen and used in the light of promoting equality for all people, particularly women and girls. No doubt about that. Number two, preventing, eliminating, and responding to online gender-based violence, including male perpetration of digital harassment and sexual abuse. We see a rising trend in that. It is what it is. The World Wide Web, as wonderful as it is, it also is very dangerous. And the dark clouds that we use as in terminology uses it to its advantage on a consistent basis, particularly in that digital harassment. We saw that, proliferated during COVID, just the anger and comments were just out of control. Promoting nonviolent actions, attitudes, and values by men and boys, and encourage them to take active part in efforts to prevent and eliminate gender-based violence in the digital sphere. We were encouraging that. We have to stay on that button, continue push it, and not leave it to their own wares. Otherwise, they've shown that they will ignore that, particularly from the men and boys' point of view. Broadening access to digital tools and technologies for marginalized groups, broadening access to digital tools and technologies for marginalized groups. That's imperative that we ask for that CSW puts that on their agenda. That if nothing else, we've seen that there are still so many gaps around the globe of not having digital access. It goes along with the decolonization earlier mentioned. And it's just hurting us, particularly in the future for our youth who don't have the access to the Wikipedia and programs for education, which is what is its original use. Last but not least, accountability of digital platforms and governments in addressing online harm. Accountability of digital platforms. This might be our biggest challenge, but we're so happy to say reports. I know many of you have seen in the news, verifiable news that the Supreme Court has now been addressed right before them regarding YouTube and some of the other social medias and how they just have no governance and no real government at this point, not even the United States, has taken that on for whatever reason. Jennifer mentioned some earlier, Silicon Valley. And so we're looking at accountability of digital platforms and governments. All righty? Next slide, please. So I see, Jennifer, we got you on here. So I believe we're going to be going to, at this
Hold on,
point.
the Mentimeter is ready, Coach.
right.
I'm
Ready
sharing
when you
screen.
are. Ready when you are. That's good. All right, guys, let's go on to the Mentimeter. Hopefully you've downloaded it now. Let's see what this is about, how it can be beneficial to us. It will be today. Question number 1, do you have experience working with men and boys in tech, media, innovation for gender justice? Look at that. 35% said they have so far. 53% said no. 12% not sure. Ladies and gentlemen, this is imperative at this point. We cannot no longer ignore it. It must be now incorporated in your decision-making, your curriculums, your outreach of, hey, we need to understand how boys and men are affected by this social media, this constant online, and one way or another, Tinder, TikTok, Facebook, you name it, Twitter, whatever. Where are they at? What are they talking about? And you need to be able to manage that. Very good. Next question. What political demands do you think are important to include in this year's CSW discussion on men and masculinities? We're looking forward to that. The commentary in the earlier section about that whole question of masculinities. Where does this purpose in the feminist movement? Are we putting too much emphasis on that? Let's hear some about what you're saying. And that was great input, Jenny, when you were saying that. Very, very poignant. What political demands do you think are important to include in this year's CSW's discussion on men and masculinities? Politically, what are we asking for them to do? These patriarchal, archaic minds. All right? We're going to let you work on that one. But I need you to be thinking on that. You know, it's one thing to just say, hey, we want you to change. Change to what? What is the process that needs to be changed? How is it? Where are we at now with that? You need to think that whole process through when it comes to political demands. You know how that works, particularly since men and men in particular are still in that regime. How to foster caring masculinities. I love it. That is a premise. Caring, nurturing masculinities. Change that whole language. We're working on that one right there. And that's key. Paternidades or responsabilidad. I'm so sorry. I'm not going to hit you with my Spanish. I'm working on that one, though. That one then we'll help it. Next time we have a session, Coach Lynn will definitely be speaking bilingual. And French, too. Trilingual. Dialogues. Absolute. More dialogues. Positive dialogues. Great. These are all great. There's another one for you. Hopefully you'll be able to translate that, but I like it already. I like it already. Practical change in areas of involved leaders. Excellent. Thank you, Danielle. Practical change in areas of active participation in politics. Perfect. Allow women to occupy spaces that were stereotypically occupied by men. Absolutely. 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 Perfect. So you see along the lines we're thinking. We're on the same page here. Changing the minds. That seems to be where it all emanates. You change someone's mind, you might be able to change their attitude and definitely their actions. So I love it. Next slide, please. We're almost there, guys, on this one. We're almost there. So I believe that was it for our show.
Yeah, we just had 2 questions on the Menti.
Beautiful.
And over to you if you wanted to share anything else on behalf of NAMEN.
I just want to say thank you again. You kind of see where we're going with this, ladies and gentlemen. Talking to men and boys. If the majority of you, if not all of you, are engaged in that some kind of way, we saw that about 53% still said you needed to get into that. Understanding their psyche, particularly now with the advent of social media and the misinformation. We just talked about that in the earlier segment. It's prevalent. It's thick. And in men's minds, it clouds already the clouds that were already there, the dark clouds. So it's imperative now that we make sure that the information that we have coming out from this body, CSW, is verified, it's factual, it's cited, and so that there can be no opposition to our facts and our statement of equality. We all understand that. Lastly, Jen, if you don't mind, what we're looking at, particularly through NAMEN, of course, continuing in North America and Canada, pushing the envelope, taking the message to marginal communities, going where the men and the boys need to hear our message and their ears are a little bit more prone to listening. We're very excited about that. Membership drives, the whole nine. However, I must say we're very interested equally in the youth. We're so excited about what CSW is going to be promoting, as well as MenEngage. The youth is our future. If we could tie off that sieve, if you will, we're bleeding, and we need to stop the bleeding right away with our youth. The fact that we're taking focus on that, particularly our boys, they're at an impressionable stage. We will be able to incorporate more of the ideals that we promote. CSW now they will be a voice among their peers. And so we're very excited about that. And I'll end with a quote, just so you say, Coach Lynn, that wasn't Coach Lynn saying that. In the United States, we have a revered abolitionist, writer, composer, and really American social reformer, Mr. Frederick Douglass, who in the 1800s, when we were still faced with equality, seems to be an ongoing fight, he said, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And I'll say that again, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And we see that now, but you see, he did not say impossible. So us converging, using our best practices, seeing where we've made mistakes before, but moving forward and in a strategic way, and now using this technology to our benefit, I believe the future will see a day where we all are equal, women, children, there's no violence, and all these things that we fight for, we will win this battle. God bless you all. Thank you so much, Jen. Back to you.
Thank you so much. And you end on our mission statement as MenEngage, a world free of violence and discrimination against all women and girls and gender non-conforming people. And really great to hear NAMEN is focusing on youth. And then also, as we're exploring, that men also are at different locations within the power hierarchy. So to also nuance our analysis, of men and boys and all their diversities and how that continues to influence, their replication, of patriarchal violence in different ways or experiences within that social power hierarchy, still under a frame of accountable advocacy, in which we center the lives of women and girls and gender nonconforming people. And we have very little time. We have one last section, which is some tips in a way for you at CSW. And I'm just going to take 2 minutes here so we can open it up, and Laxman will lead us through the Q&A section. We're looking forward to hearing from all of you. So let me just go through this quickly. Next slide, Tom. This year, the model for CSW is hybrid, as we heard from Nyasha. So if you are joining CSW in person, we're sharing a mapping survey, so you can be involved in all of our organizing there. But also, you can join this year virtually. There's a lot of different virtual events. And you can watch all of the official proceedings of CSW, like let's say the big official negotiations with governments, the different expert panels on the theme through UNTV. So we'll share more information about this, but just be aware you don't have to be there in person to be engaged this year. Next slide. And if you are in person at CSW, it's quite an overwhelming space. I think it's really important to know that you can engage in everything. You have to be quite selective, and also to consider just individual care, but collective care. There's so much backlash too within CSW. We see really regressive NGOs joining sessions that are LGBTIQ focus, for example, and that can be really wearing, no? And even scary and dangerous for participants at CSW. So just for us to consider collective care, let's take care of each other, of our feminist, LGBTIQ youth colleagues, and really be there, no, with the aim of taking care of ourselves, taking care of our civil society partners, no, especially those that are facing the direct aim of backlash, no, or any sort of opposition that can be quite frightening within these spaces, no? Next slide. And then just to think strategically about your time at CSW, starting with the light purple, you can support and stand in solidarity and learn, no? It's a learning space. There's hundreds of sessions, over 500 sessions that are organized. So go with the aim to learn from other colleagues, no? That are experts on this theme, that are putting on incredible conversations with colleagues from all around the world. So just go with that aim to increase your understanding as well. Also, a key consideration is take the opportunity. If you are flying to New York, it's a very dedicated, a big dedication of resources and time, shall we say, for so many, even impossible with visa restrictions, though. So it's a privilege to be in that space, and also use the opportunity to build partnerships with key partners, including the UN, your official delegation, different contacts that will have repercussions in the future for your organization, for your regional or national networks of MenEngage. So take opportunity for that, and also join other MenEngage member spaces, and also other discussions on men and masculinities, no? So you can hear what's taking place and how that agenda is being hopefully politicized. And if not, raise some tough questions, no? I wrote that too here for if you find yourself in a regressive space by any chance, then maybe raise some tough questions within that conversation. And just know you can't participate in everything. It's impossible. There's too much happening. So just be strategic. And here is a few guideposts on some of the ways you may think about organizing your time. Thank you for listening. We shared so much and really appreciate that. And before we are ending today, we'll open up a Q&A. Laxman, do you mind joining us so that you can lead us through an open space of dialogue with participants? And Laxman is co-director alongside Joni van de Sand, who's currently on maternity leave. And Laxman, thanks so much for joining, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your interest. We do realize it was very comprehensive and hence could be very overwhelming to some of you who are not really familiar with some of these processes in the past. So please bear with us, and we will definitely share the recording as well as the presentations with all of you. And we will also be uploading these documents in our Learning Collaborative space. So stay tuned for that. And for more information, also this morning we had sent out kind of a newsletter that is focused on the CSW this year, where you can find a lot of information that would be relevant and of your interest. So there are few questions. Maybe I think while I would encourage everyone to add your questions, if you have any right now in the chat box as well. Or if you want to say something on or speak out the questions, then please do raise your hand and we will open up the mic for you and you can bring up your question. But one question probably to start with that have come up in the chat box is from Nicolette from Belgium on why was this theme selected this year? Was it to ensure women have access to IT professions or any specific issue we notice in general? So not sure if Mpiwa, Rumbie or Jenny, if you would like to respond to that on why this theme was selected for this year's CSW, while we wait for other questions in the chat box.
I can share the program of work is set for 5 years in the future. And maybe really important to note, last year, as many of you know, the priority theme was on climate justice, the first time it was ever centered within the CSW space. And equally, this was another theme that was of critical importance to feminist movements who were involved in the advocacy around setting this program of work for the next 5 sessions. So it's sort of a long-term decision made through the planning process of CSW. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah. Thanks, Jenny. So this is a collectively agreed process where those involved in the decision-making around CSW come out with the most pertinent while listening to the asks around feminist movement and the priorities of feminist movement. And they come out with these themes that they would like to prioritize in a particular year. But then there is a secondary theme as well that is revisiting that particular theme that is relevant as well, as you saw in one of the slides earlier. And yeah, there was some comment about the technicality exercise that was there, the technical exercise, which was a little overwhelming. We do acknowledge that. And for many of us, it is extremely challenging process to engage in that language advocacy. But those who are familiar or are very much into language piece around advocacy, it could be so that was the intention to bring this today with you so that you can get a hands-on experience of what actually we engage in when it comes to advocacy around CSW. So some of you who may have received the email from Jenny with proposed language around the work on transforming patriarchal masculinities and working with men and boys for gender and social justice. And that is the language advocacy we engage with. And that's what it entails, which is a very tedious, very time-consuming and resource-consuming exercise and requires quite a lot of innovative thinking on the use of terms and terminologies that we want to see in the final agreed conclusion. And for many, it may not be something that you would be engaging in, but CSW is not only about that, but yes, that's the ultimate goal. But also CSW is a space where you can build relationship with a number of feminist LGBTIQ youth advocates from around the world who are doing things, certain areas of certain works in certain contexts that could be of relevance and build relationships as well. So when you engage around CSW, do look out for those opportunities where you may engage with people that are doing similar work or with whom you may want to build your own relationships so that you can find the community for yourself as well. And that's why the MenEngage caucus meetings are relevant and could be relevant for you to get in touch with other MenEngage members from around the world. I don't see any additional questions, except that as I said, the recordings and presentation, we will definitely share that with you.
I have a question, Lakshman.
Yes, so there is, now there is a question from Irfan in Pakistan. Are there any accountability indicators for making governments accountable for the recommendations or for their commitments they make by approving the agreed conclusions around CSW? So yeah, Mpiwa, Ruby, if you are there, or if not, Jenny, if you can respond to that. Sorry, or Nyasha, if you want to jump in as well. Or anyone else who is aware of that. If not, Jenny, yeah, please go ahead, considering the time factor.
Thank you so much. I think it's important to note, which is why we just emphasized a little bit the convention, CEDAW convention, which I was mentioning is binding for countries who have ratified the treaty. And treaties and conventions, those are interchangeable terms, no? For legally binding international agreements that do come with a responsibility of governments to implement and to incorporate within their own national machinery and legislative frameworks. So that's why they continue to be super important, no? Like recently, they just adopted the ILO convention, and that was such an important moment for feminist movements because the conventions do have more weight. Resolutions such as the resolution coming out of CSW, which, as we've learned today, is the agreed conclusions, are recommendations that are non-binding. So they do come with a little bit less weight, shall we say. But that does not mean that we cannot use them effectively for advocacy at national and regional level, because we can still use them to hold our governments to account as agreed upon commitments within the international space, no? And it's kind of a tactic that we can consider because sometimes the government within the country and the government representative in the regional body and the delegation and permanent mission in the international space are not articulating, right, in a way that is meaningfully cascading those outcomes upwards and downwards, no, through these systems. So we can have that role as civil society of putting pressure on all levels. This was agreed at international level. This was agreed at regional level. This is needs to be agreed upon or incorporated at national level. So just a long answer for a little bit less weight than a treaty, but still important tool, no?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jenny. And yeah, I think, and then in the next session, please do join us for the second one as well, where we will be delving a little more into all of these aspects as well on how can this become a tool for your national or local or regional advocacies that you may be involving in. So please do join us. One question that was also in the chat, which was not necessarily a question, but I think the ask about whether there is an downloadable versions of calendars. So one information that we would like to share is that for you can find the sessions online for available on the NGO CSW website, particularly for the parallel events, and the UN Women website for the side events. So we at the Global Secretariat are pulling together a calendar that we can share with you if you are interested, with the sessions and events that our members and partners are organizing, and sessions around men and masculinities that could be of relevance for you or interest for you. And we can share that with you if you are interested. But for the general side events, all the kind of events, you can find them in either on the UN Women website for the side events, which are the official events. Then also for the parallel events, you can get that information in the NGO CSW website. So that's the information I wanted to, and I don't see any other questions. And thank you all for joining. I see Tom has added a link in the chat box around how you can subscribe to our information channel by clicking that link. And if you select which one you are interested in, you will be looped into our communication channels, and you can continue receiving information around CSW, but also broadly around the work that we all are doing globally as well. So thank you all once again for joining us today, and I will hand it back to Jenny.
Thank you so much. I think just to guide or signpost note to, I just added in the chat the registration link for tomorrow. If you would like to join us, as we've been sharing, we'll go in much more depth and add this element of backlash, which I know is something being experienced in all contexts around the world. Really looking forward to that session and unpacking how it's playing out from national to regional to global level, including the UN. So it's going to be a really interesting discussion. We hope you can join. As well, I want to signpost to, if a colleague of mine doesn't mind adding, we have a mapping survey. So if you are attending CSW this year and want to be included within the MenEngage organizing, please consider filling out the survey, and then you'll be included in ongoing communications that we organize on a separate email thread throughout the session, starting tomorrow and leading up all through the end of the session. So please take a moment to fill that out. And we do have a survey as well, just because we are really hoping to continue organizing these collective learning spaces under the Learning Collaborative. So it's very short, and we just would really love to hear from you. How was this experience? How can we continue improving it? what did we miss? What did we not address that needed to be addressed? So just some questions that will support us in continuing to organize collective learning as MenEngage. So please do connect with those colleagues. If you don't mind adding for me in the chat box, the members mapping survey, and then also the survey. Thank you so much. And I just want to open it up just 1 minute if our presenters today wanted to share any final thoughts. Please do come on and let us know closing remarks or final reflections for our participants. And just share video and let us know.
Jen, if I may, thank you so much. I just want to say thank you again for the organizers of this event, this pre-CSW. I learned so much. It's my first, so I feel much more ready. I do. So thank you so much on all aspects. I also want to say congratulations on today. We've already made contact in Germany with one of the organizations there looking to do some things with the boys. So you see, it was effective. And your networking and your collective thinking and your collaborative effort. And so I just want to say thank you and congratulate you all to all those who are in this mission. Know that we have already won. And it might have seemed like it's taken a little while, but our ducks are in a row now. And after this year, it's a wrap. Anybody against us, Laxman, let them email and tell them, just let it go, let it go. So congratulations on everybody. God bless you guys. And I'll see you in New York.
Thank you, Coach. It reminds me part of our organizing around CSW is to hold MenEngage caucus meetings. And really the intention there is, yes, to strategize politically towards the session, but also to link and learn from other members. So do fill out the mapping survey to receive more information on that. Mpiwa, Rumbie, Nyasha, any final thoughts to share?
For me, I'll say thank you, everybody, for coming through, and we're really looking forward to your engagement, especially for those under 35 who also identify as young people, or if you're also working with young people, please kindly link them up with us. Lakshman has shared the email that you could ask them to send us the codes that they have, and we can amplify their voices, and we'll be sharing as much information as we can about youth engagement and participation in CSW. And also feel free to reach out and just let us know what kind of support can we give, especially when it comes to participation of young people. And I see someone just typed in the chat from Kenya. Yes, and one of the, and also to kindly link the young people who are from your member organizations or from your regional networks with the young people who are in the youth reference group, so that we also get to facilitate the flow of information. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. I'm adding an email address here, advocacy@MenEngage. For anyone organizing an event at CSW, email me the information here and we'll include it in the collective MenEngage calendar. That amplifies it to all members at CSW, members and partners. And so then it's just a good way for us to support each other and participate in each other's session. Rumbie, Mpiwa, any thoughts from you?
Just to say to everyone, thank you so much for making the time to participate. We look forward to continue to engaging with you, even during CSW time. We look forward to connecting and to also collaborate in the many ways that we've already shared, and also on the different platforms that will be available. So we hope that we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Rumbie, I'm not sure if you're still on. I think you dropped off, but maybe just to share, we'll also compile the resources from today, including the presentation and the video recording, and we'll be housing that within the collab page. So we'll also connect with you, to follow up on those resources. And thank you very much. Hope to see you tomorrow. Appreciative to all speakers today. Thanks for sharing your wisdom, on CSW. And yeah, see you tomorrow. And if not, we'll stay in touch. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.